How does one approach a review for The Last Guardian? Do you speak of the sweet highs of emotional bonds between boy and beast? Or the wallowing lows of a game that suffered development woes for years, so much so the final product wears the scars of this troubled lineage? Either choice will speak volumes of The Last Guardian, a game that will be discussed for some time to come, but I fear those conversations will tilt closer to the shortcomings than to the victories. What are those shortcomings and victories? Well, that is the second interesting question of this session. Join me as I attempt an answer. Team Ico's last release was Shadow of the Colossus at the end of 2005. The studio was relatively quiet about their next project until varying reveals in 2009, and then the words, The Last Guardian, were uttered. 7 years later, Team Ico is no more, and Gen Design fractured off from Sony, where the creative director Fumito Ueda laid his new claim. Still contracted to finish The Last Guardian, 2016 saw the long-awaited confirmation of release. 11 years after their previous effort, the gaming landscape once again had a target for pointed fingers whenever the redundant video games are art discussion arose. And what a target it was. The Last Guardian is a fucking weird game. That sentence literally writes itself. I'm not going to ruminate on the social implications or cast the term avant-garde, or patronise anyone with the notions of transcendence and the illusions of importance. The Last Guardian is just weird. And weird at a time where video games, not all, but most, are trite and predictable. This is both a blessing and a curse. On the one hand, The Last Guardian offers something you simply cannot find anywhere else. But with this highly nuanced and obscure appeal, it almost sabotages its allure and potential accessibility to anyone who stands outside its established circle. Almost every title released these days is clinical safety-chasing focus test group homogeneous vomit, and proliferates the same tropes, archetypes, and well-traversed paradigms. The Last Guardian is none of these things. The main selling point of this ethereal adventure is commanding a great winged beast, and that mechanic barely works. It's like playing football with a flat ball. Sure, some bugger's going to try and find something to love, but everyone else is going to ponder why do this to yourself? And love or hate our temperamental apparatus, at least it isn't a chest-high wall and a brown nation of ADS fodder. The Last Guardian throws you into an overexposed barren world of impossibly tall structures made by those whose names have long been lost. Once proud ramparts crumble and give way to rudimentary wood and effaced masonry. Caves and deep ravines lead to imposing temples that shoulder sparse pockets of forestry with idyllic groves. The sound is often muted, with only the boy's commands and grunts accompanying you. Music is rare and understated, yet striking in moments it punctuates. Narrative is almost completely replaced by the promise of answers to a mystery never mentioned. All you know is you are in a foreign land, and the only semblance of salvation lies with the other occupant of the cell you start in, the titular guardian, Trico. Regardless of how you feel about The Last Guardian, Trico is the soul of everything that happens in the 7 to 10 hour journey. Your enjoyment of the game, and the time you choose to spend with it, will be a product of your feelings towards your feathered friend. Everything begins and ends with Trico. Herein lies the most divisive aspect of The Last Guardian. In its purest form, it's one long escort mission with a temperamental teenager. A lot of the challenges lay before you will be nominal, yet the controls will often make them feel as if they were mountains. Gameplay-wise, The Last Guardian is a video game a decade too late. This might sound harsh, but notice how I didn't necessarily say bad. The tumultuous development cycle was always going to reflect in the final game. Sometimes that mirror can make a game, other times it breaks them. The Last Guardian feels and plays like something that would have reigned supreme at the eve of the PlayStation 3. Every aspect shows that this is clearly the intention of the time, to lead the march with Sony's new console. But this was a missed deadline, and all those ideas and scripted events created then, they don't mature like a fine wine. They atrophy as new ideas take broad paces towards better scripts and new unthinkable mechanics. Sure, it's mostly how to creatively kill digital humans, but progress has undoubtedly been made in 10 years. The only part of The Last Guardian that feels even remotely close to a modern game is the physics that governs the world and every single pinion on Trico's back. This is the part where I lament and crucify the technology of The Last Guardian. It had to come, and here it stands. Visually, it has a wonderful aesthetic. It shows its age with geometry and texture work, but all considered they establish a striking presence and a consistent world that I would call beautiful. It has a regal quality, and it definitely strikes a nostalgia chord from Ico and Shadow, but when directly contrasted to its contemporaries, the comparison can be less than complimentary. This is salvaged by the breathtaking sense of scale achieved here. There are few developers that can come even close to nailing the same impressions of vastness that The Last Guardian languishes in. Structures vault endlessly towards the heavens. Each ascent brings an even further stretching horizon, with stratums upon stratums to greet you. The zenith of the visual design is both the foliage and Trico. It has a hypnotic quality that matches the bright, surreal look of the game. Each moving part oscillates with the gentle insistence of the physics, and looks superb in motion. This motion is however cuckolded by poor optimization and a terrible frame rate. It is a heartbreaking realization that such an artistically pleasing vision can be so savagely ruined by a frame rate that never learned not to shit where it sleeps. Camera sensitivity is intentionally low in The Last Guardian, to counteract the instability, and I dare to think what would have happened on a more intensive slider, as turning the camera in certain sections made my eyes feel like I was peeling an onion. The only silver lining on this darkest of points is that the game is so technically non-demanding that the frame rate will sparsely affect your inputs, but don't applaud too quickly, as the boy's complete obsession with overly long animations impedes your ability to navigate the world at every opportunity. If I were to say the animations in The Last Guardian weren't nice, I would be a liar. Without mentioning Trico, the jewel in this particular crown, the animations have a palpable charm. They converse the struggle and strife of every precarious jump. They speak of vulnerability around every corner, and they add a needed weight to your actions. However, when the animations and the physics come together, it is not sweet music they make. It's a feline orchestra of what the fuck is he doing moments, resulting in falling from things you never intended, jumps that did not have the height you felt they should, or weird overshooting of chains and ladders. There exists a myriad of awkward oddities brought on by these two factors. Then there exists weird interpretations of your circle command. Throughout the game, circle conducts several actions, but the game doesn't seem to trust your ability to do these, so it provokes a very insistent auto-correction, where the boy will forcibly move to where the interaction must be done. At times, this is fine. At others, it can lead to infinite loops of the boy running in a circle unable to complete his path. It makes the animation priority feel obtrusive and annoying, and it happens a lot. The Last Guardian doesn't even demand much of you as a player. The rudimentary sequences of mild platforming and occasional puzzles are often standard. Some are more involved and more taxing than others, but for the most, nothing here is going to vex players for too long. What will vex is when the boy does not do as instructed and force an unwanted pitfall, or when he decides to take a looping side path of the direction you give him and you sail into the void. All of these criticisms can be learned and compensated for, but it doesn't make the movement feel any better, nor does it defend the dereliction that most mechanics in this game reek of. The worst offender is the actual flow of the levels. The Last Guardian's platforming is very subtly signposted, and I actually really like this feature, as it is a fresh breath from the forceful NPCs and the overzealous waypoints. It can lead to occasional frustrations, but that is the heritage of video games. Before we were so closely led, we forged our own path, and this is a paradigm that has over the years been forgotten in favour of accessibility. I respect the convenience, but I never liked the omission of the old ways. The Last Guardian is not afraid to let you wander, and I enjoy that. There are no Deus Ex Machina convenient yellow bars up the side of a temple screaming "climb me." The design is often understated and easily overlooked, but I appreciate that. What I don't appreciate is pondering for 30 minutes as to how I scale something with the boy, when it was Trico's job to perform an action the game never informed me he could do. That leads to frustration, and my first playthrough was littered with this melody. There is a turning point in The Last Guardian where you stop approaching areas from a platforming perspective and wondering what is expected of you, and instead ask, what is expected of Trico in this area? Then there is the tug-of-war of getting Trico to perform said task, which is a work of art in itself and will be discussed further in Trico's section. I have no real issue with relying on Trico to navigate the land. It reinforces the factors the dev team were going for, this feeling of isolation, bolstering the companionship, and the boy's reliance on Trico to overcome. These staples will once again dictate how you ultimately feel about The Last Guardian, but they don't replace the fact you will spend a large amount of your traversal time watching or waiting for Trico to do his thing. Once again, there is an enjoyment in subservience. How many games can you think of that completely remove the power fantasy of the player and have him completely codependent on the actions of another? This is a rarity in games, and must be applauded for difference, if nothing else. I just feel like it affords far too much time spent not actually playing the game. And I play games to play them. And the combat is an area where most games force players to participate. Well, not here. The combat in The Last Guardian is about as bad as it gets. I've had more fun at the dentist. The general encounters have the boy dueling with automaton soldiers who specialise in abducting small boys and ferrying them into nearby closets. As a player, you're powerless in these moments, as most of the moves at your disposal will put you in an overly long recovery animation, and the instant grab enemies will scoop you up with the promise of a white van full of puppies. This is combated by mashing buttons to clean the bukkake of unknowns from your screen, and allow the boy to break his bonds. These encounters are at their best when stealth-driven and altogether inoffensive, but at their worst, they are prolonged shitfests with a terrified Trico as you evade an army of horny Zangiefs. Occasionally, you get the opportunity to pull the head off a downed foe, only to spend 20 minutes in animations throwing the helmet away, and thus you get grabbed to repeat the mind-numbing process of damaging another controller in the hopes of calling Chris Hansen. To say I think the combat should have never existed, and if it had to, it should have been stealth or Guardian related, is the understatement of this epoch. The only thing these sequences add to the game are a general sense of castration of every player who dreams of being a hero, and the reinforcement of Trico's role, his complete superiority in this game. It's a tough moment when you become cognizant that you are indeed the comedic sidekick of the hero. With Trico, you can accomplish everything. But alone, you're merely Rob Schneider, and that isn't enough. I love the idea of being so fragile and dependent. I also love how empowering the fight with the other Guardian makes you feel. This is the area where the game really should have focused. I imagine they chose not to, for fears of trite comparisons to Shadow, but I think a series of varying encounters with Guardians would have fundamentally improved this campaign, as the one you partake in is the best part of the game. Two forces of nature colliding in a storm of feathers, tooth and claw at its most violent. The only difference between the two warring factions is a frightened little boy. He knows he must help, but is unsure as to how. It's a wonderful sequence, and it completely wipes the sour taste of the redundant tickle factory of bad touch Jade Empire nonsense. How do you measure the merit of a game's value? A hard question to answer. The Last Guardian is an adventure game with some simple platforming, puzzling elements, and questionable combat. It's easy to break down each aspect individually and highlight the flaws. The Last Guardian does a lot of unexceptional things. It isn't the platformer you're looking for, and the puzzles aren't of the caliber needed to sell this game. The main selling point here is its heart, an unquantifiable value that I cannot help but use when speaking about this very strange game. A lot of that heart stems from Trico, as will Malice. Never have I loved and hated a component of a game more than Trico. The ever-endearing dog, cat, bird, rat thing, Trico begins the tale a damaged prisoner, impaled and frenzied. Together over the course of your journey, a bond will grow between the boy and beast, as each starts to trust the other. It culminates in a duo that no conventional level designer can stifle. If you're lucky, this bond will also grow in you too, as you spend the majority of time interacting with him. And herein lies the kicker. Everything that The Last Guardian is anchored on your relationship with him. And the devs absolutely nailed him in every conceivable way, except the one that matters to me. I have never seen an animal in a video game act and share mannerisms so much like a household pet. The love and attention given to his AI is nothing short of spectacular. This marriage between behaviours and immaculate visuals combines in a companion unlike any other I have shared a game with. But the realism captured with this technology is a little too real for my taste. As with a lot of pets, Trico has a tendency to do whatever he feels like. In any other form of interactive media, this statement would be an accolade worth praising. In the medium where Trico is essentially the conductor of your adventure, it leads to problems. Sometimes Trico is a laser-guided missile of efficiency performing tasks you didn't even realise were asked of, or taking you to heights you completely missed. Other times he will wear the crown of twats and aspire to be the greatest twat of the kingdom of twats with his unadulterated twattiness. He will ignore your commands. He will stare at God knows where without a care in the world. He will go the wrong direction, jump to the wrong place. He will shake you off him. He will intentionally push you off him. He will do a multitude of things, but never what was asked. The game governs Trico's actions by a series of simple commands. You can point him in the direction you want, tell him to jump, praise him, treat him kind with pets, but ultimately, you do not control him. Your agency is an illusion, and this is both the greatest achievement and the most aggravating criticism. The technology here is amazing, but when your actions go unanswered at the most simple of instructions, there is only frustration to be found. Sometimes a single instruction will get Trico to be most effective. Other times, a barrage of commands is more conducive to the results you wanted. Yet occasionally, too many commands seem to inhibit his decision-making. All of these variables come together and the result can be sweet poetry or abject chaos. I spent the majority of the game shouting at Trico while experimenting with the best approach to make him perform any given task. The results always varied. It all combines to produce a game with beauty and grace, but a general lacking feeling to its central mechanics. Emotionally, the game can hit the mark so perfectly, with a story that makes you earn the slightest vespers of narrative. Yet mechanically it can feel like complete shit to actually play. And it's such a disconnect. I am a player who values feeling and responsiveness over everything. I will take a lesser visual fidelity for greater performance. In this 4K fetishistic era of video games, I'm on an island away from the vast population of magpies mesmerised by shiny things. So almost every design choice in the mechanical side of The Last Guardian irks me. That said, I still recommend this game, because it dares to be different in a time where generic proliferation is king. I can't promise you won't question parts of it, or feel frustration, but I can say that there is something special captured here. It may not be the easiest thing to show or describe with simple words, but if you can experience it, and on my first playthrough I certainly did, there's a sense of wonder and joy that modern gaming has lost. This is a very special game. This is a rage-inducing game. This is a draconian game with a $60 price tag. It's a really weird game. In spite of its feels, the game at times simply feels bad. The platforming is subpar. The puzzles rely far too much on redundant barrel quandaries. The Guardians are the most interesting interaction in the game, but they're underused and often ignored. This is the weakest of Ueda's games by far. Yet with complete embracement of Anathema, you should definitely play this game.